Hi, everyone. I am Sharon Buck, and I'm going live to you from a very warm Pacific Northwest here. We're in the beginnings of, I think, what's supposed to be quite the heat wave. So I'm trying to stay cool out here, and I'm competing with the birds and the planes. But anyway, happy Friday to you and wherever you are. And I hope that you are able to have a bit of a respite this weekend, take a few deep breaths and come back to center. And a reminder that we have a regular sound bath coming up this Sunday live in my group if you want to join. That would be lovely. It's in the Empowered Empath Entrepreneurs group, and you can find us there on Sundays at 4 p.m. Pacific. So anyway, I'm Sharon Buck, and I'm an intuitive sound alchemist. I use healing frequencies or sound to bring people back to center, unblocking them where they feel stuck, and getting them moving forward and more aligned with their passion. And my passion is helping the empath entrepreneurs specifically find their authentic selves so they are more in alignment with their business. And the topic of today's live is the positive payoff of digging deep. How to avoid doing the same things over and over again without anything changing in our business and in our lives. And I have some, I think, interesting observations that I've made and a little bit of science thrown in here to kind of whet your appetite as to the work that I do, which more and more scientific studies are being done. We just found out about another one about how sound actually affects blood cells. Very positive research that's happening all the time. And so I'm excited to be on this cutting edge of something called sound healing. If you don't know about it, Google it and you'll find out a lot there. Uh, you know, in terms of just to make sure we're all talking on the same page, when we talk about emotional health, we're talking physical health. They're tied, they're connected, and our bodies tell the truth. And sometimes we don't listen. Oftentimes we don't listen. I know for a very long time I wasn't listening. I had chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, and I was just in constant pain and constantly tired. And I wasn't really going deep. And so this is what this talk is about, is this positivity that we can attract in our lives. But to do that, we have to dig a little deeper, I think, than many of us are used to doing. And think of our feelings as a guide, like a GPS, our personal guidance system. I just, it's our personal GPS that literally tells us when things are off for us. And as empaths, we have to be really careful because we can easily pick up on other people's energy, and it can really affect us to the point, if you're not aware, you think it's your stuff and it actually may be somebody else's stuff. So actually doing this particular work that I do, and other people who work with others who are sensitive, it's very easy. Even as a massage therapist, we were trained. It was very easy to pick up energy from clients that you're working on. You're touching them. You're in their field, and you don't have to be touching them, but it's very direct energy you're picking up. So if you have a cranky customer, you might start to feel really cranky afterwards. So it really pays to pay attention to what's going on with you and really get to know yourself really, really well so that you can be on it. And this is part of the secret of being a happier person and a successful person in business. I mean, if you're not doing that, you're not going to find that, unfortunately. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail. So, I often talk to people or hear that they're stuck in this revolving door. They keep doing the same things and nothing changes, right? The definition of insanity, keep doing the same things with, you shouldn't expect different results. And then they wonder why, and worse yet, can get into blaming others or shaming themselves. And this is not helpful. So, what are we afraid of? Ego, when we talk about ego, is afraid of being annihilated. If you do any studies in psychology, The stuff about existential threat, and the ego, it has been created as a way to cope through difficult times, and it's formed in childhood, and it's a way to protect ourselves from very difficult things. In many ways, as children, we can't feel the full extent of what we're going through, or we're not allowed to, or worse yet, punished for it. And unfortunately, many people have been. So, what are we afraid of? This other piece of getting into denial, denying that there's a problem, even though your body is in pain, getting into addictions where, I'd rather grab, and I know this one for myself, I'd rather grab for some yummy food, especially sugar, to, cope with whatever's coming on. Numbing out, often smoking is considered one of those ways of numbing out. Blaming yourself or others, this analysis paralysis, of hashing through over and over again the thinking, well, if this only happened and then that would happen and then everything would be great. It doesn't really get us any traction. It actually gets us off track and gets us avoiding the very thing we need to face, which is feeling our feelings. So what are we afraid of if we feel our feelings? Some things I've discovered in my own personal journey, as well as working with clients. I have 7 points I wanted to share with you. 7 ideas of what we're afraid of. I think a lot of us are afraid of overwhelm. When we're afraid, we're afraid we'll puddle. I just learned that term the other day, believe it or not. I assume that's about crying. We're just turned to a puddle. The tears will never stop, right? We'll succumb to our feelings, and we'll just be overwhelmed. And I know this one. I remember when I was crying, I thought it would never stop. Well, I'm here to tell you that it does. But if there's years or decades of this grief that's been, buried, basically, it's going to come out, and when it does, there's going to be a lot, usually. But that's not to be afraid of that, because that's the work I do. It can be it can move things quickly. Okay, number 2, the fear of losing yourself. Our ego identity is so wrapped up in this, this is how I am, this is how I've always been, and it's afraid of change. It wants to be in control, and when it's not in control, it's threatened, literally. It's like, I've got to keep this together, and it's got to look a certain way. And I know, actually, being in the performing world, there was this sense of, this is my identity, definitely people around me, it was like, I'm this. And it seems so artificial and superficial to me, and I just couldn't connect with that at a deep level. I felt, that I was singing and performing, ultimately from my heart, and then this superficial piece just didn't fit for me. And so that's actually one of the reasons why I quit auditioning. I just thought, oh, wow, why would I want to be part of this world? The third point is that we'll get more confused, when in fact the opposite is true. We'll actually get more clarity. But when you're in the thick of it and there's all kinds of shit hitting the fan, it does feel like, oh my God, I've been angry at this person, and now I've been sad about this loss, and now, all of these things start to come together, and we think, I'll never, I'll just, it's just a mush of feelings, and it is easy to feel like you might be confused. But the truth is, when you start pulling on that thread, yeah, at first things may be coming apart a little bit, but boy, you start getting some clarity about who you really are and what your goals and just who you are. I mean, we can't ultimately follow our passion and do what we love if we don't even know who we are at our core, right? The next thing is this belief that we'll hurt ourselves or other people, if we feel intensely. So, this idea that if we express our feelings, it won't be it won't be acceptable, or you can actually do damage. Definitely, if you're feeling a lot of intense emotions, and especially anger, you need to figure out how to get that out safely. You do not want to hurt yourself or others. um, but there are ways, definitely, so you don't have to keep it stuffed down, because that is not going to be helpful to you in the long run. I think we also have, we'll be afraid that if we start feeling our feelings and actually coming into our own, we'll have no excuses or fewer excuses. In other words, we can't blame anybody. All of a sudden, if things are going better, there's no reason for us to step up to the plate. And so we'll have to take responsibility for ourselves, our emotions, our actions. We'll have to, for Pete's sake, we'll have to ask for what we actually want. That's been a big deal for me. What if I ask and I'm rejected? I mean, all these things are kind of tied into taking our power, having power, and owning what we're feeling and going through. So we won't be able to make up excuses anymore. I mean, we can try, but it's going to be less and less easy to do. Then the sixth thing is that I think we judge ourselves for feeling what we're feeling. This is a result of old programming. It's very cultural. I mean, we see it in living daylight in the, I'm sorry to pick on the UK, but in Britain, I mean, there's just this calm exterior. Everything's going to be perfect. I mean, this idea of the royal family is an example, but underneath it's hellish, right? So I think it's great that Prince Harry is actually, really being out there and being an advocate for mental health right now, because he's saying, hey, it's not all roses. It's actually really hard. Or Britney Spears, I've just been reading about that. I mean, this is what's really going on versus what it looks like. And so we judge ourselves, I think, and instead of feeling more compassion for ourselves and the truth is, if we feel more compassion for ourselves, we'll feel it more for others. I mean, this is the path to healing the planet, in my opinion. If we don't heal ourselves, we're not going forward. It's plain and simple. So it's not just about us, it's about everybody and everything, and the planet, the health of our planet as well. So, this judging of, if, I'm weak somehow if I'm feeling sad, and for men, I feel especially strongly for men, that they've had this programming very early, that it's not okay for a guy, for a boy, for a man to cry. And that's so unfortunate. I mean, I don't know where that comes from, because some of my favoriteest men, including my husband, are people, men who can cry, who aren't afraid to cry, and aren't afraid to show their feelings. And that includes other emotions as well, of course. And this idea that judging ourselves for feeling what we're feeling. But then the seventh point, I guess I combined 6 and 7, is more that others will judge us for being too sensitive. And we see this a lot with empaths. I mean, I think a lot of us grew up with this, we're too much to handle, too sensitive, too something. And we'll be seen as weak or fragile. So, I still remember, and this was as an adult, when I lost my dog. And I mean, he was like a child to me. I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're empaths, have, close connections with your pets, or fur children. When I lost my dog, it was like losing a child. And I remember, sharing that with somebody, and they kind of almost laughed at me and said, "It's only a dog." And I mean, it wasn't only a dog to me. I was feeling really, really deep, deep sorrow over that loss. And ironically, I still think of him, because it's been 8 years since he passed. Um, but yeah, like almost to the day. As empaths, we have the added challenge of confusing others' feelings with our feelings, and I've already talked about that. So we need to learn how to disentangle ourselves and be able to discern what is theirs and what is ours. Sometimes it's just a simple inquiry. If you start to feel something suddenly in your body that you didn't have a minute ago, it's likely not yours. Yeah, and that's interesting. As entrepreneurs too, I think we're afraid to go there because it might mean we begin to unravel. We maybe we'll become like non-functional, when in fact we will likely have more clarity on the other side. And we're also afraid of taking actions as entrepreneurs because, my goodness, it might mean failure. And I know this one personally. Every time I go live, I'm afraid something will go wrong if it's not technical, or I'll say something wrong, or I won't make sense, or whatever. I mean, this sense of stepping out into our power. And often it means stepping into our vulnerability first. Sometimes I think when we think we're dealing with it, we really fool ourselves. It comes back to bite us. And so physical illness is one example. And our relationships begin to suffer, or we find ourselves in debt. All of these things can sort of just be ways that life isn't working for us. And so, we can only shove things down for so long. Anything we have unresolved will resurface. So we can try to stuff it down, but it won't work in the long term. As entrepreneurs, our stuff rises to the surface. We are constantly pushing our envelopes, or we should be, moving out of our comfort zones, or not. And yeah, I'm definitely doing that, and I continue to do that. I was just feeling that this week. I thought, well, what's next? Things are going so well. And I knew there was something. I mean, I'm definitely working on another project now. So it's the sense of, yeah, I'm not okay, actually. At some level, I'm not okay just with the status quo, with just being where I am, comfortable. Yeah, it's not easy, though. When we're not present to feel our difficult emotions, we're not present to ourselves either, our inner child. We are not reaching that place in us that is our core, because the child, that's all they know is their feelings. And so if we actually deny ourselves our feelings, we're in a sense really pushing that child away. And so we're just doing to ourselves, what was done to us. Also, when we're hooked on drama, this I found really interesting, because I know about this, but I delved into a little bit of the science of it. Our nervous systems are literally on autopilot when we're hooked on drama, and we have difficulty letting go of the old stories because they energize us at some level. So the oxytocin, actually, and progesterone are some hormones that keep us on ourselves from going into the feeling. We will do everything to avoid feeling the pain of feeling our feelings. So being hooked on drama is this adrenaline rush too. I mean, I know this one very well. I mean, one of the things I used to do is, I know it actually sounds trivial, but it's actually not. I know a lot of you know this, is that I'd be late for things. I mean, chronically late, like always late, like not just a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes late. And I finally figured out this was my kind of way to get my body going, like this adrenaline rush that I was creating. I created it to get me moving and out the door. So that aha for me, when I realized that I could change it. And so again, bringing it out to the open, to the light, it's a lot harder to keep that going, that story. And when we've been through trauma, our brains become wired to intense stimulation, and the pituitary gland and hypothalamus produce endorphins, that pain suppressing, pleasure inducing substances that are common, by the way, the same thing as for drug addictions. So is it any wonder that, people are addicted to drama? Bad things happen. All of us have bad things happen to us. And it's the sense of not willing to go into the reason why maybe some of that is happening. That's really a shortcut. I could get into that. I don't want to get into that right now, but there's a negativity bias also for our survival. It's called negativity bias, where we're literally, because of the fight and flight programming we have in our our limbic brain, it's this sense of focusing on the negative, focusing on what's not working. We're built for that, and so to get out of that is a trick. So why should I go there? Maybe to feel happier, maybe to get more clarity, which leads to more confidence, and of course, becoming more aligned with our passion. And I want to use this little plant analogy that I have, that I came up with because I love plants. And plants for me are, I just couldn't get over how apropos this is. We can amend the soil. When our plants aren't doing well, this is the idea. When our plants aren't doing well, if you do any gardening, or even if you've tried, at some point, if it's not doing well, you'll see it, right? I mean, the leaves start yellowing. I have a plant that's doing that now, or they'd start to droop, like in the heat. I see some plants right here by my garden, some drooping, like, maybe I didn't water it enough. So we can tell pretty quickly on the outside that something's not right. So we need to get to that root cause as quickly as possible so that we don't lose the plant. That's a creaking branch, believe it or not. Well, how can we do this? Well, if we're planting, if we're gardening, we can amend the soil. We can improve the soil. Perhaps that's the issue. We can improve the watering. Perhaps that's the issue. We can move it completely in a sunnier location. If it's in a pot, it's a lot easier to do that. We can give it fertilizer. We can trim off the old growth. If none of that works, we might have to actually uproot the entire plant and move it to another location entirely. And we actually did this with a plant, not to get too off track here, but it's actually doing beautifully now. It looked like it was dead. I didn't think there was any hope for it. And my husband said, no, I think if we move it into a pot and move it over away from this spot, it'll do better. Well, sure enough, it's thriving, but it didn't look like it in last year. So just like people, shifting their lives to be in a more productive situation can assist their growth rather than add to the baggage that pulls them down. And if we continue to live by the old stories or our past, we are undernourished, underwatered, and we become struggling plants that attract pests. And I mean, really, we're talking negative and positive. When we care for ourselves like we would a treasured plant, however, we are much more likely to get an abundant harvest where we reap the benefits of our labor, but not unless we address the root cause of the problem in the first place. This is why, and I'm all for the medical community because they're there, they do wonderful work when things aren't working, oftentimes. But there are times when they're not getting to the root cause. Another medication on top of something is probably, first of all, it brings a lot of side effects, but secondly, it may not actually get to the issue that's causing it in the first place. And by the way, if it's an emotional cause, which a lot of this, I think a lot of it is, it's not even close to solving the problem. The deeper issues will keep recurring. So if we only address the superficial, we won't be fixing the problem. We'll be opting for a Band-Aid rather than a cure or solution. Yeah, so that can show up as recurring physical symptoms, recurring difficult situations in life, feeling stuck, feeling fatigued, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, by the way, all of which is a symptom of that something, they're all symptoms that something is off. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, what we focus on expands. So if we continue to focus on our wounded self, we continue to play the victim, and unfortunately, nothing will change. Well, that's because like attracts like. So a little bit about energetics of feelings, and then I'll be wrapping up. The principle of entrainment, if you don't know it, look it up. We entrain to the positive or negative vibes around us. So especially as empaths, if we're in a negative work environment, unfortunately, that's going to rub off on us unless you're like super, super in tune with yourself and you know how to ground yourself, you know how to, slough off the garbage at the end of the day. You really have to know yourself well in those situations. And I know way back when I had to actually quit a job because it was so hard. And I was in the middle of this deluge of feeling, all these feelings that came up and all the unresolved wounds came up. And it was, I couldn't stay. I had to quit that job. This was years ago. Um, Look into Masaru Emoto, who Japanese man who actually did studies, and you probably know about it, with atoms of water, and when he exposed them to positive thoughts, the water molecules looked very organized, and when they were exposed to negative thoughts, they were like all over the place, chaotic, just not healthy, right? And so if you take that analogy, and it's not that far of a stretch, because like the science study I just told you about works with blood. Same thing. Blood, I mean, it's liquid, right? They've discovered something very similar, that certain frequencies or thoughts, which are frequencies, by the way, can actually clump together blood cells, not so good, or actually disperse them a little bit and in an organized way. So this can be is directly tied to our health. So if you want things to change, and you have to look at changing, what you're experiencing, and basically you have to look at yourself. And I wish I could say there's a workaround, but there isn't. I know, because I've tried and it hasn't worked. But I'll tell you what has worked. And, I keep thinking about, it's also not worked. We're waiting for some magic cure and for somebody to rescue us, like Sleeping Beauty or Rapunzel. Like, we all know that doesn't work. Um, what does work is when we change the old story and take an active part in our healing, so we can be more successful in our life and in our business. And that's the work I do. This is using positive frequency, the positive vibes, literally, that brings your body into alignment with that. Basically, your ears and your brain entrained to these positive frequencies. And then, you start to release the old stuff. And then, amazingly, you start to feel better. And this is not magic. They're just discovering, and many hundreds of thousands of people have experienced this work and have had amazing results in short periods of time. So if you're at all intrigued, and if you're committed to releasing the old stories and moving forward in your life and in your business, I invite you to join me on a free call. I usually do about an hour is how it works. And then I will actually find a block in your system energetically and work to release that. So if you're interested, give me a shout. You know where to find me. Well, just another plug for the sound bath this Sunday. The first way to start working with this, with feelings and working to access those, is calming your nervous system. That's really the first step. And so we if we're revved and we're caught up in drama, we need to bring all that down. And so if you want to experience some of that in healing sound, I welcome you to the sound bath on Sunday at 4 p.m. in Pacific. The focus this Sunday is aligned with your power and with power and confidence. And I just wish you all positivity and progress on your journey. And let me know if I can be of help to you. And thanks so much for listening. It's been really warm out here. I'm turning red with the heat. I hope you're staying cool wherever you are. And of course, if you're on the other side of where we are, you're probably experiencing your fall weather. But in any case, all right. Well, take care. I hope to see you soon, and have a great weekend. Bye for now.